Hi, I'm Mark Shayler, and I want to talk to you today about change. I want to talk to you about how things are going to change, and actually I want to talk to you about how they've changed and maybe to the wrong direction. But I'm going to do that to a backdrop of 1980s pop music. I know, but just go with me. But first of all, hello. Is it me you're looking for? I'm Mark, and I help companies rediscover their purpose, develop better business models, design new products and services, build meaningful sustainability strategies, and chart a future. And I've been doing that for 32 years. Working in food, working in farming, working in electronics, working in packaging, you name it. My claim to fame, is it a claim to fame? Not certain. I was head of sustainability for Asda Walmart in around about 99-2000. So I know the sector really well, and I know its problems, obviously. And I've pulled together a list of my kind of career highlights, and I'm not going to show you them because we've only got 15 minutes, but I'm going to just tell you one story. And this is a story rooted deeply in the 1970s. When I was about 10, I'm 52 now, I took the school out on strike over the quality of the school meals. Why? They were too good. We were getting cooked dinners and vitamins and everything. And I wanted a little bit of the convenience food I was having at home in school. So we marched up and down the playground, and we did that for 3 hours, and we had placards down with dinners, we want sandwiches. And teachers gave in, and we were allowed to bring sandwiches. So I went home that night and I said to my mum, hey mum, didn't tell her the truth because you don't, do you? I said, hey mum, there's been this thing at school, and as a result we're all allowed to bring sandwiches instead of dinners. And my mum said, well Mark, some people will be bringing sandwiches. You are going to have a hot cooked dinner every day, and it's going to be at school. So on day one of the new regime, much to my shame, I'm stood at the front of the queue holding my tray. This is a true story, and I don't even bother changing the names. Looking at Mrs. Thomas, the only nice dinner lady that ever lived. And Mrs. Thomas looked at me and she knew it was my fault, and I looked at Mrs. Thomas and I knew that she knew it was my fault. And she said to me, I'm glad you're still with us, Mark. And I said, yes, Mrs. Thomas. She said, do you know what would happen, Mark, if everybody had sandwiches instead of dinners? I said, no, Mrs. Thomas. She said, I wouldn't have a job, Mark. And she was right. 5 years later, there were no school dinner ladies at that school. There were just lunchtime supervisors. And this feeling of responsibility hit me, because with great power comes great responsibility, and we all have great power. Now, I went on and I've done a load of work in sustainability, but I really like to refer back to the kind of timeline of my development, because I've grown up in really disruptive times. Born in '68 at the height of the social rights movement. Rachel Carson had just written Silent Spring. Gil Scott-Heron was writing some of his best work, and we were just beginning to change the way that we used food and grew food. And it was a great time. Now, I'm going to try and benchmark some of the conversations that I'm having with you with the price, the gate price for milk, just to illustrate a few points. So in 1970, 2 years after I was born, farmers were receiving pence per litre, and it was still measured in litres then. For milk, they were receiving 4.1 pence per litre for milk. Just keep that thought in your head. And we were shifting away from natural food to denatured food. We were shifting away to kind of more artificial food. And I was listening to Mark Bolan. Roll on a few years, and now I'm eating something called Angel Delight. It's a pudding that goes solid, and it doesn't even have to be in the fridge. This isn't natural. What's happened to food? Well, we began to add science to food in a really negative way. We began to favour convenience and speed over what it did to us and what our food did to the planet. And I was listening to David Bowie. In fact, I'm still listening to David Bowie. And we began to see the rise of a few musical movements that are super important, and I'm going to tell you why as we go. Milk, you're thinking, what was milk doing at this point? 1977, just 7 years later, farmers were receiving 7.62 pence per litre. The thing about music, and the reason that I've built it all the way through, is that every single reaction, every single action has a reaction. And when we look at music and we look at things like glam rock, the reaction to glam rock was prog rock. Serious, earnest musicians playing 20-minute guitar solos, dreadful. And the reaction to prog rock was punk rock, people who didn't know how to play anything, democratizing creativity. But like most things, they only get better when women get involved. And Susie arrived and made punk significantly better. Now, what else was happening at this point? Well, there were whole adverts on the TV that were filmed allegedly Martians telling us that we were crazy for using real potatoes to make mashed potatoes, and we should use instant mash, just mix it with boiling water. We peel them with our metal knives, and we had begun to disassociate nature and food at a massive level, and we didn't know what we were doing. Milk, at this point, gone up a lot. Farmers were getting paid 12.5 pence per litre. This was about 1980. Now, what's the reaction to punk? What's the reaction to that? Well, actually, it's not so much a reaction, it's a build. Because at that point we'd begun to see immigration, and you'd begun to see people moving into the UK to work in the car factories. I was living in Coventry at the time, and suddenly you began to hear music that was better and different. It was punk with something added. It was called ska, because diversity is a strength. Diversity makes things better, and I don't just mean diversity of peoples, but of course I do. I mean natural diversity. I mean avoiding monocrops and monocultures. As soon as we begin to get single crops, we remove diversity, we remove nature, and everything gets worse. Now, what's the reaction? What is the reaction to punk and ska? Well, it's to go more flamboyant. It's to go all new romantic. This was a good era. This was a great era. What was happening to milk prices? Well, in 1983, farmers were being paid 14.8 pence per litre, marginal increase on where they were before. And we were beginning to rip hedgerows out, because what were hedgerows for? They just got in the way. Get rid of hedgerows, you can plough faster. Plough faster, you can plough more. Plough more, you can lose more soil. But it's okay, because we've got this yield, we've got this increased yield, and stuff's going to be fine. And in any case, we can listen to New Romantic and forget all about it. What happened next? Well, the reaction to this overblown New Romantic movement, the disruption that follows that, was to go back to basics again, because everything's a cycle. So enter the mid-80s and the C86 and the Smiths. And they sounded amazing. Now, at the same time as this, we were beginning to change the way that we raised animals. Chicken, which had become a treat as I was a kid growing up, really rare, became commonplace, became every day. And we did that by squeezing all of these hens into the same place and snipping off their beaks and watching them get urine burns on their feet. But it was okay, because it was cheap protein, and cheap protein is good protein, right? Nah. Because the effluent that comes from those places, it pollutes. It really, really pollutes. And so we needed to then develop industrial systems of dealing with the effluent, and we're further denaturing everything that we're doing. Milk at this point, 1986, 13.28 pence per litre. Interesting. It's going up, but it's not going up by much, is it? At all. Now, at this point, I fell out of love with milk. Until then, I'd loved milk. I drank milk a lot. At this point, I decided it was going to be great fun to have a milk drinking competition with my mates at school. I won. I drank 4 pints in under 4 minutes. But it all came straight back up again. And that was it. Not drank milk since. Not my bag. Because I overdosed. Oh yeah, I overdosed on the white stuff. Milk. So, what happened next? Well, I went to university and I stopped drinking milk and I started drinking Newcastle Brown. And the reaction to that guitar-based music, the disruption that followed that, because one follows another, was twofold. It was the emergence of dance music, proper dance music, Chicago house. It was the emergence of dance music into indie pop, so therefore the Stone Roses, and that was a glorious moment. Milk was at 15.1 pence per litre. I know you're asking, I know you're thinking. But we also saw the rise of amazing hip hop. Hip hop based around something. Public Enemy, NWA, they were rapping for stuff that really mattered. Purpose had re-arrived. Purpose was back. And so were the Green Party. The 1989 European elections saw a rise in Green Party votes like we'd never seen before. Hang on a minute, things are changing. Everyone's waking up. It took a few decades, but this was the beginning of the great wake up. And people were beginning to get more and more interested. And it was a sight to behold and a very good time to be alive. What happened next? Well, I stayed in the town where I went to university. I stayed in Bradford. And I started to work in the environmental movement, and I paid to go on permaculture courses, and we did all of the green stuff that we did, and we started an organic box collection scheme run through Goosemore Organics. We didn't start it, they started it. I just had people coming around my house to pick the boxes up, and we began to get our fingers dirty again, because back then in the early 90s, I began to realise that we'd become so disassociated from the medium that gave us our food that I wanted to get back. And it really mattered. 1995, 22 pence per litre. It hasn't gone up much, has it? Really? I'll talk to you about inflation in a minute. It hasn't gone up much, but things were beginning to change. And then we had Britpop. And that's great. But we were still headed in the wrong direction. From an agricultural point of view, we were still headed in the wrong direction. Roll on a few years, 2005, I'd had a few kids. Milk was now delivered in cartons, not in the Unigate dairy bottle, not in the big, tall, thin bottle that we had in the 70s, in cartons, which meant the way it was delivered was via supermarket, which changed the purchasing power, which changed the profitability. And at 2005, farmers were only getting 17.1 pence per litre at the farm gate. It's not good enough. We were still doing box schemes. We were using Riverford at this point, but we were still doing box schemes because the connection to soil matters. Musical at that time, new rave, not my bag. But it's a good thing that it's not my bag, right? Because it belongs to other people. So roll on a few years, roll on to now. Where are we now? Well, everything's changed. Suddenly, sustainability is everywhere. Suddenly, good is the new cool. Suddenly, we care. We've woken up. We have less than 60 years of soil health left. We've got a decade to sort out farming, to sort out agriculture, and to sort out carbon capture. Otherwise, well, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? So we have to do it. We have to sort this out. Milk is currently fetching 30.1 pence at the farm gate, according to DEFRA. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Because if we were to take that original figure of 4 pence and add inflation, that would be worth 54 pence. So farmers are getting nearly half what they were getting back in 1970. And that's really interesting. But this is the most fascinating thing. I used to drink beer, eat meat and avoid vegetables. Now I eat mainly kale, and I don't drink beer, but I do drink oat milk. Whoa, oat milk, what's that about? Well, what that's about is retail price. That's about £1.80 per litre. Things are changing. We need to change with them. I'm not saying no more animals. I'm saying fewer and better. And more kale, because I actually really, really love it. And what am I listening to? A band called Run the Jewels, because they're rapping about things that matters, because purpose is back. Good is the new cool. Health's become the new wealth. Well is the new thin. Kindness is a competitive advantage, and kindness starts with what you eat, and what you eat starts with what you grow. Everything we do has an impact. It's about living longer and living better. That's what we're striving for. And it isn't sufficient to do things better. We have to do better things. And agriculture sits at the heart of this. And we forget it at our peril. But consumers remember it. We've seen the rise of the consumer that is belief driven. If you look at the stats, Edelman do this survey every 2 years. 1 in 2 consumers define themselves as belief driven consumers. They will avoid a brand that doesn't do the right thing. Or 65% of them will avoid a brand who doesn't do the right thing, even if they have no connection to the thing that the consumer's interested in. This is fascinating. This is really interesting. Brands aren't what they say they are. Brands are what we say they are. This changes everything, and it changes the relationship with the farmer. Everyone wants to get one step closer to the food producer, because that makes the most sense and distributes the best profit. And in a world where over 60% of our marketing impact is outside of our control, then we can use proper stories to tell the truth. We need to go back to go forwards. All of these shifts, and there's loads of shifts that are happening. We're seeing a shift in power from west to east. That's huge. Watch it. We're seeing a shift in power from male to female. Much overdue. We need more of it. We're seeing a shift of power from old to young. No, we're not. Old ways of thinking to young ways of thinking. And the young ways of thinking, they're actually the really old ways of thinking, and we need to embrace that. From retailer to consumer, from professional to amateur, from employee to leader, from product to service, and from CSR is dead, to CSV, creating shared value. Don't spend 10% of your surplus doing something great, spend 100% of your income doing the right thing. That's the way the world's going, and we need to watch that. And then from wealth to health. I'm not romanticizing poverty. You need a certain amount of income just to stay alive and to keep your self-respect. But once you've got that, we're much more interested in health than we are wealth. And from data to insights, these shifts are huge. Whether they be in health, packaging, provenance, shift to plant-based, shift to better reared meat, ugly fruit, gut health, brain health, low or no alcohol, less sweet, small brands, CBD, THC, sustainability, you're at the center of it. Agriculture is at the centre of it, and we ignore that at our peril. Look, disruption is now normal. Change is bloody inevitable. How it was done yesterday is not how it should be done today. Nothing stays the same, and neither should you. The challenge comes when the world's changed and you haven't. Don't moan about the vegan movements, join it. Grow oats, make milk, do something different, embrace the new difference, because the truth is, you're powerful. You've got superpowers. You know you have. And I'm going to take you right back to my first story. That little boy stood in front of that dinner lady, shaking with his tray. The realization is that with great power comes great responsibility, and you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. Thank you.